What if the oldest map on Earth shows lands we don't know? You're here now, and I want you to just let your body sink into wherever you are. Loosen your shoulders, let your breathing slow down. The day is over, and nothing else needs your attention right now except this story. You can close your eyes or keep them half open, letting the words carry you like a slow tide. Relax your arms. Feel the weight leave your legs. You're safe here. This is your time. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're curled up in a quiet bedroom, maybe on a long night shift, or maybe you're lying under the stars. Wherever you are, imagine we're both in the same room now. The lights dim, the air still. Only the sound of my voice and the quiet hum of the night around us. Now let's step together into a place far removed from the noise of the present. A place where time folds, where the lines between history and dream are blurred. Imagine you're walking down a narrow stone staircase, the walls cool beneath your fingertips. The air smells faintly of parchment and salt water. The sound of your steps echoes, slow and deliberate, until you reach a heavy wooden door. You push it open, and it swings with a groan like it hasn't been touched in years. Inside, there is a single table in the center of a dim chamber. On it lies a vast sheet of parchment, its edges frayed, the surface covered in strange curves, lines, and marks. A map. Not a modern map, not one you could find in a school atlas. Its colours are faded, its ink bleeding softly into the fibres with the passage of centuries. The glow from a small oil lamp dances across the surface, making the coastlines shift and shimmer like they're alive. You don't know why, but your heart beats just a little faster. You lean closer, tracing the edges with your eyes. At first, you recognize some shapes, the bulge of Africa, the curve of South America, but there are others that make you pause. At the bottom of the parchment, where on most maps there would be nothing but endless ocean, there is land. Sweeping, detailed, edged with bays and mountains. Land you have never seen. Land no one alive today has walked on without miles of ice above their heads. Somewhere in the room, you hear the soft ticking of a clock. But it doesn't seem to belong here. The air feels thick, as though history itself has been captured in this space. The map almost seems to hum an inaudible vibration in your bones, as though it remembers things you have forgotten. You run your fingers just above its surface, not touching, almost afraid to disturb it. Whoever drew this had seen things we cannot imagine, and yet, the more you look, the more you feel. Not that you're discovering something new, but that you're remembering something old. The chamber smells faintly of salt, though you're deep inland. You close your eyes for just a moment, and in the darkness behind your lids, the lines of the map change into coastlines, the coastlines into waves, the waves into voices carried on the wind. You hear them murmuring in languages you don't understand, and yet they feel familiar. They are telling you that this is not the beginning of the world. It is a page in a book we have read before and forgotten. When you open your eyes, the oil lamp flickers, and for an instant the map seems newer, its colours brighter, its edges sharp. You feel as though you're standing beside the one who made it. You see a man hunched over the parchment, his hands steady, his eyes narrowing as he copies details from another older sheet. The older map is brittle, perhaps ancient beyond reckoning, yet its coastlines are clear. He dips his pen and continues, line by careful line, carrying forward knowledge that had already survived generations. The chamber seems to shift around you. The stone walls breathe with the slow pulse of centuries. Outside, you imagine the world as it was when these coastlines were true before the poles froze, before the seas swallowed cities, before the names we know were even spoken. The silence here is deep. It isn't the silence of emptiness, but the silence of something waiting to be heard. A silence that wraps around you like a blanket, keeping the world at bay. You could stay here forever, letting the map pull you into its depths. In this moment, you feel a strange mix of calm and wonder. The calm is easy. It comes from knowing you are safe, from the slow rhythm of your breathing, from the comfort of the story. The wonder comes from the sense that what lies before you is bigger than you could ever comprehend. This piece of parchment might hold truths older than the oldest stories, truths that survived storms, fires, and the erasing hand of time. And so, you stand there in the glow of the oil lamp, listening to the quiet hum of history, feeling the soft pull of sleep at the edges of your mind. The map waits patiently. It has waited centuries, and it can wait a little longer. Tonight, it will share its story piece by piece, tide by tide. Now, close your eyes just a little more. Let your breathing match the rhythm of my words. You are here, at the edge of something vast, and there is no rush. The world beyond the walls of this room is distant now. Only the parchment, the lamp, and the sound of your own breath remain. Wherever you are listening from, whether it's across an ocean, in a small city apartment, or in the quiet of the countryside, know that the map is here for you too. It has been waiting for this moment, for you, for us. And in its lines and curves there is a question, a whisper that will carry us deeper into the night. What if the oldest map on Earth shows lands we don't know? You're still standing in that quiet chamber, the faint glow of the oil lamp breathing warmth into the cool air. The map stretches before you, an ancient riddle etched in pigment and parchment. It's beautiful, but it's also unsettling. Not in a way that brings fear, but in a way that feels like a whisper at the edge of your mind. A soft voice that says, you don't know the whole story. Your fingers twitch, wanting to trace the shapes. But before you can, you pause, and you hear yourself thinking the question out loud, almost without meaning to. What if this ancient map, older than any known civilization, shows lands we do not recognize? What if these shorelines belong to a world we've never seen? Or perhaps to a version of Earth that existed long before our histories began? The thought drifts through you like a slow wave, and with it comes a feeling that you are no longer entirely in the present. You take in the details again. The familiar curve of Africa is here, yes. The long sweep of South America too. But the southern tip of that continent stretches too far into the cold. And there, in the very base of the map, the land spreads in graceful arcs, capes, and inlets that match no modern chart. There is no ice in these drawn coastlines, no barren white emptiness. Instead, you see mountains, valleys, perhaps even rivers winding inland. It feels alive. The chamber around you seems to dim, the walls retreating into shadow as you focus on that southern landmass. You imagine yourself sailing toward it, not in a modern steel ship, but in a wooden vessel, the wind pressing into canvas sails. The air is sharp with salt and the smell of wet rope. The waves beneath your feet roll like breathing, and in the distance the land rises, green and stony and untouched. You can almost hear the cries of seabirds circling overhead. You blink, and you're back in the room again, staring at lines of ink that have held this shape for over 500 years. That is the accepted date for this fragment. 1513. The work of an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, who lived in the golden age of exploration. Historians say he compiled it from the most accurate charts available to him, including some brought by Portuguese sailors, and, intriguingly, one said to have belonged to Christopher Columbus himself. But there's something about the confidence in these southern lines, the way they are drawn not as guesses, but as known coastlines, that stirs a quiet resistance in your mind. How could anyone in 1513 have drawn these with such certainty? In that year, the southern reaches of the globe were still shrouded in mystery to Europeans. Antarctica would not be officially sighted for another 3 centuries, and yet, here it is. You lean closer, noticing the way the ink bleeds into the parchment, soft at the edges like a shadow on water. The colours, faint ochre, faded greens, deep browns, still hold their depth in places, as though the land itself refuses to vanish entirely. There are notes written along the sides in old Ottoman Turkish, a flowing script like waves curling along a shore. You can't read them, but you feel their meaning comments about where the information came from, where certain shores were sighted, what older maps were consulted. It's in those notes, history tells us, that Piri Reis mentioned something extraordinary, that parts of his map were based on sources from the time of Alexander and from maps drawn in the days of the ancients. These weren't his words alone. They were a chain of inheritance, knowledge handed down, copied and recopied until the original source was already ancient beyond recall. And so, the map becomes more than just a chart. It becomes a bridge between the world you know and one you can only imagine, between the continents you can point to and those you can only dream of, between the now and a then so deep in the past that it is almost a different Earth. You take a slow breath. Outside this chamber, there is noise cars, voices, the sharp edges of modern life. But in here, it's as though the air itself is heavy with centuries. Every line of ink feels deliberate. Every mark feels like a clue. You can almost sense the hands that held the older maps Piri Reis studied. Perhaps they were in a different language, a different material, drawn on stone or pressed into clay. Perhaps they were older still, copied from maps that no longer exist anywhere except in this faint echo on parchment. It makes you wonder, what else is out there, hidden in archives or buried beneath dust, carrying pieces of a history we're not supposed to remember? How many fragments like this might have been lost forever in fires, in wars, in the slow decay of neglect? How much of our past is gone, and how much still waits quietly for someone to find it? You close your eyes again, letting the question sink in. You can almost feel yourself floating over the globe, the landmasses shifting below you as if the ice is melting away and revealing the green and rocky outlines of a forgotten world. The seas are higher or lower, the climate different, but the shapes are familiar enough to tell you. This was Earth, our Earth, just not the way we know it now. The oil lamp flickers and a draft slips through the room, carrying the faint scent of something ancient like aged paper and far-off storms. You think about how long it has taken for this map to reach you tonight, the centuries it survived, the eyes that studied it, the hands that protected it. And all the while, it carried the same silent question across time. Do you remember? Your breathing is slow now. Your body is warm and heavy. But your mind drifts, carried along by that question like a leaf on a calm river. You are part of a line of countless others who have stood before this map, each of them feeling the same quiet wonder, each of them wondering if the world is far older, far stranger than we have been told. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the chamber, the ticking clock continues. It doesn't rush. It doesn't intrude. It simply marks the steady passage of moments, the way the earth itself turns without hurry. Time is patient here, and so is the map. It doesn't demand that you understand it all tonight. It only asks that you listen and follow where it leads. You lean back slightly, your eyes still fixed on that southern landmass, your mind tracing the lines again and again. Each time you look, it feels like you see a little more. Not new details, but the same details in a new way, like a memory sharpening in focus. Perhaps it is nothing more than coincidence. Perhaps it is exactly what it seems to be. Or perhaps it is the faint outline of a truth too old to fit into our history books. And so you stand in the stillness, letting the mystery wrap around you, letting the questions sink deeper, knowing this is only the beginning. The map is waiting to tell you more. The room feels different now, as though your very act of asking that question, what if this map shows lands we don't know, has shifted something in the air. You glance toward the edges of the chamber, but they seem swallowed by shadow, as though the walls have drifted farther away. Your focus narrows, drawing you deeper into the shapes and curves on the parchment. You know it's time to step out of this small space and into the vast world the map represents. And so, in your mind, you begin to move. The air grows cooler, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked stone and the tang of salt. The faint crackle of the oil lamp fades into the sound of a distant tide. You are no longer in the chamber. You're hovering above a city, an ancient city, its streets lit by the pale silver of a rising moon. Stone walls and domes stretch beneath you, and there, tucked between narrow streets, lies a building older than the ones around it. This is Istanbul, the city where the Pire race map sleeps today. It rests far from the ocean, yet its lines tell of seas and continents, of coastlines drawn with uncanny grace. The map is kept in a museum vault, deep beneath thick stone walls, guarded against time. Few have seen it in person. Most who pass through the museum's upper galleries never know what lies below, this single, surviving fragment of a chart, drawn over 500 years ago. From above, the city hums softly. Footsteps echoing in old alleyways, the distant call of a night bird, the rhythm of waves far down the Bosphorus Strait. You drift downward, closer, and the scent of old parchment returns, mingled with faint traces of leather bindings and aged wood. The streets give way to an image in your mind, the map itself spread out on a table, the light glancing off the faint gloss of its aged pigments. It is not a full map of the world, only a fragment. The surviving portion shows the coasts of Western Africa, the bulge of South America, and most controversially, the curved coastline of a southern landmass that should not be there at all. In your mind, the edges of this parchment seem impossibly precise, like windows into a time when the world's shape was already known, and yet was not. The setting is not just a vault. It is a meeting point of centuries. Ottoman Istanbul was a city where worlds collided east and west, old and new. Piri Reis himself was no ordinary map maker. He was an admiral, a sailor, a man who had travelled widely and gathered scraps of knowledge from many sources. His map was born here, at the crossroads of empires, drawn in an era when explorers were pushing into unknown waters and when whispers of strange lands were just beginning to spread through Europe and the Middle East. In this imagined moment, you can almost see him, Piri Reis, leaning over his work. The table is wide, the air thick with the smell of ink and drying paint. He holds a quill knife to sharpen his pen, and the sound is soft but deliberate. He studies other charts laid out beside him, Portuguese maps of Africa's coast, Spanish sketches of the Caribbean, and older sheets whose origins are lost to time. On some, the paper is yellowed, the ink faded to a shadow of its original colour. But the lines are sure and confident. He copies them with care, knowing that what he is making is more than just a tool for sailors. It is a record of all the world as he has come to know it. In the city above, merchants unload spices and fabrics from distant ports. The air is thick with the scent of cinnamon, saffron, and the sea. But down here, beneath the bustle, Piri's focus is absolute. His pen moves with steady grace, and you realize something. He's not drawing these southern coastlines as guesses. He's copying them from something he trusts completely. The longer you stand in this vision, the more the details sharpen. You notice the fine grid of lines crisscrossing the parchment, a system of navigation used by mariners long before GPS or even precise longitude measurements. The colours still hold faded but alive greens for forests, browns for mountains, pale blues for rivers and shallow seas. Every element feels deliberate, intentional, as though this is less a drawing than a memory being preserved. You step closer in your mind, leaning over the table, your shadow mingling with his. You can almost read the notes he scribbles along the edges. They're not just labels, but explanations where certain information came from, what source maps were used, which coasts were seen firsthand, and which were taken from older works. You recognize the name Columbus among them, and your thoughts jump for a moment to the famous voyages across the Atlantic. But there is something else, a reference to maps from the ancients, words that seem almost too casual for the weight they carry. If these lines truly came from the ancients, then this is not just a 16th century map. It is a palimpsest of human memory, each layer carrying whispers from an older layer beneath it, like voices speaking across centuries. The thought makes you feel small, not in a frightening way, but in the way you feel small when you look up at night sky filled with stars. Your awareness widens again, and you imagine the geography the map represents. You see the warm coasts of Africa, the rugged cliffs of South America, and, far below, that mysterious southern landmass. It feels closer now, as if you could simply step across the parchment and find yourself standing on those ice-free shores, the wind off the water cool but not biting, the ground beneath your feet firm and green. In this place, the world's history feels layered, folded over itself. Istanbul is just the present surface. Beneath it, the Ottoman Empire's golden age. Beneath that, the Byzantine Empire. Beneath that, Rome. And beneath even that, countless civilizations whose names we no longer remember. The map is like that too, each coastline a layer of memory, each note a surviving echo of some older truth. The vault grows quieter. You can almost hear your own breathing against the soft murmur of time. You picture the hands that unrolled the map decades after Piri Reis's death, perhaps in a palace library, perhaps on the deck of a ship bound for new shores. Then you see the hands of the archivist who rediscovered it in 1929, tucked away in the Topkapi Palace, and the wonder they must have felt in seeing these strange southern coastlines for the first time. Your eyes trace the lines once more. You feel yourself drifting between the map and the land it depicts, between the vault and the open sea. The boundaries blur until you're not sure if you're looking at history or standing in it. The image of Istanbul fades, but the sensation remains a quiet awe, a deep awareness of place. The Piri Reis map is not just an object locked away in a museum. It is a living thing, a piece of memory that connects us to a time before time. And here, standing in its presence, you can feel that connection, as if it were a thread tied gently to your wrist, pulling you deeper into its story. You let the feeling settle. Your body is heavy with relaxation. Your mind is clear, but calm. The map waits patiently for the next chapter, its silent invitation stretching across centuries, and you, standing here in the stillness, are ready to follow. The vault feels steady around you now, as though the stone itself has grown comfortable with your presence. You've walked with a map through whispers and imaginings, but before you wander any deeper into speculation, the story needs its anchor, the official account, the calm, measured history that scholars tell, the one found in books and taught in classrooms. It may not hold all the answers, but it is the starting place, the frame into which every anomaly is set. Piri Reis. His full name was Ahmed Muhyiddin. Piri was born sometime around 1465 in Gallipoli, a naval town in the Ottoman Empire. From a young age he lived on the sea following his uncle, the famed corsair Kemal Reis, who served both as a privateer and as an admiral. Together, they sailed across the Mediterranean, charting routes, studying coasts, and recording ports. These journeys honed his skills not only as a sailor, but as a meticulous mapmaker. He was not a man who guessed. He was a man who measured, noted, and compared. By the early 1500s, the Ottoman Empire was at its height, a vast realm stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the Black Sea to the Red. Knowledge flowed into Istanbul like spices and silks, carried by caravans and fleets. European voyages across the Atlantic were still fresh news, and rumours of strange new lands were spreading like wildfire. It was in this climate, where curiosity and ambition met trade and empire, that Piri Reis began his most famous work. The map was completed in 1513, drawn on a piece of gazelle skin parchment, supple yet durable, measuring about 90 by 65 centimetres. It was not meant to show the entire world. It was a charter mariner's tool covering the western coasts of Europe and Africa, the eastern coasts of South America, and an expanse of ocean between. The rest of the world, if it was drawn, has been lost to time. What survives is only a fragment, though it is enough to spark centuries of debate. In his own notes on the map, Piri Reis claimed he had compiled it from around 20 different source charts and maps. These included new Portuguese maps of Africa and the Americas, Arabic charts of the Indian Ocean, and most intriguingly, older maps said to date back to the time of Alexander the Great. He also claimed to have used a map made by Christopher Columbus himself. This was a bold statement, as the Columbus map is now lost to history. Whether Piri truly saw it or relied on second-hand copies, we cannot know for certain. The fragment was drawn using a Portolan style, common in the medieval and early modern Mediterranean. Portolan charts were prized for their accuracy along coasts and harbours, marked with radiating lines used for navigation by compass. While they were not meant for inland details, they were exceptional for guiding sailors along the shore, precisely the kind of skill Piri had mastered in his years at sea. For centuries, the Piri Reis map lay forgotten in the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. It wasn't until 1929, during renovations, that it was rediscovered by museum staff. Imagine the moment. A rolled parchment, brittle but intact, being unfurled for the first time in perhaps hundreds of years. The staff must have recognized its age immediately. The curling script, the pigments, the careful hand. But they could not have guessed the stir it would cause once studied. Scholars examined the map, confirming its date of 1513 through Piri's own inscriptions. The coastlines of Europe and Africa matched the cartographic knowledge of the early 16th century. The depiction of South America, too, was remarkably accurate for the time. Its bulge, its tapering tip, even some river mouths carefully placed. This confirmed what history already knew. By 1513, Portuguese and Spanish explorers had charted large portions of these regions. But the official account has an explanation for this precision. It was not magic, nor was it evidence of lost civilizations. It was the result of careful compilation. Piri had gathered the most accurate maps available to him, blending the knowledge of multiple cultures into a single chart. His skill lay in uniting these sources, adjusting for discrepancies, and producing a cohesive whole. The oddities in the map, the features that would later ignite controversy, were noted, but, in the scholarly view, not mysterious. The southern coastline that some interpret as Antarctica. The official stance is that this is simply an exaggerated continuation of South America, drawn before explorers knew its true length and curvature. The lack of ice, artistic license, or a reflection of incomplete knowledge of the southern latitudes. In the academic telling, the Piri Reis map is important not because it rewrites history, but because it preserves a snapshot of global exploration at a precise moment in time. It is a testament to the interconnectedness of the early 16th century, when sailors and scholars in Istanbul, Lisbon, Seville and Alexandria were piecing together the jigsaw of the world. Piri himself would go on to serve the Ottoman Navy for decades. His later works included the Kitab Bahriye, the Book of the Sea, a massive compendium of charts and sailing directions covering the Mediterranean in exquisite detail. He lived through battles, alliances, and shifting tides of power, and his maps reflected the Ottoman Empire's mastery of the seas. But despite his skill and service, his life ended abruptly. In 1553, during a naval campaign in the Persian Gulf, he was executed, some say, for refusing to commit his fleet to a hopeless battle. Others for political reasons. His maps, however, endured. And so, in the official record, the Piri Reis map remains a marvel of its age, but not a mystery. It is explained as the product of a skilled compiler, a man with access to the best geographical knowledge of his time. The peculiarities in this telling are mistakes or guesses, not revelations. Yet, even as you hear this measured scholarly version, something in you resists letting the story end there. The room feels heavier again, as if the map itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to ask more questions. Because while the official history is neat and tidy, there are details, small stubborn details that refuse to fit so easily into the frame. Details that will not stay quiet. For now, you let the calm voice of history settle in your mind, like a slow tide smoothing the sand. You feel your breathing match that rhythm. You know this is only one version of the story, the surface layer. Beneath it, other layers are waiting, older and perhaps stranger. You will get to them in time. but for now you rest in the steady light of the official account, knowing it is just the first shore on a much longer voyage. And in the stillness of the vault, the map watches, patient as ever, its lines silent but unforgotten. The stillness of the official history hangs in the air, like the pause between waves. For a moment it feels, complete this neat story of a skilled admiral gathering charts from every corner of his world, assembling them into a masterpiece of 16th century cartography. But as you stand there, letting your gaze drift again across the lines and curves of the map, something begins to stir beneath the surface of that tidy account. It is subtle at first, like a whisper slipping under a closed door, but it grows with each breath you take, the feeling that something doesn't fit. You lean closer, the glow of the oil lamp spilling across the parchment. At first, you try to see the map as the official story tells you to. South America here, Africa there, the ocean between them a wide blue expanse, but your eyes keep drifting downward to that southern sweep of coastline curling along the bottom edge of the map. The scholars call it a mistake, an overextension of South America before its true shape was known. Yet the longer you look, the less it feels like a mistake at all. The curves of that coastline are too deliberate. The bays and inlets are drawn with a sailor's precision, the kind of detail that comes from seeing land with your own eyes, not guessing from rumour. And there is something else. The way the mountains are marked inland, not as vague humps, but as a defined range, as if the cartographer knew they were there. You find yourself tracing them with your eyes, imagining the feel of the wind on those slopes, the rush of rivers fed by snowmelt, except there is no snow here, no ice. The land is green in your mind, not white. You try to push the thought aside. After all, in Piri Reis's time, no one had seen Antarctica, and the idea that it lay beneath miles of ice was not even imagined by most. But a quiet doubt has been planted now, because what you see here does not match the frozen, barren place we know today. It matches something else entirely, a vision of a land before the ice came, or perhaps during a time when the climate was very different. Your mind reaches for an explanation, and you remember the words Piri himself wrote in the margins of his map. That some of his sources came from the ancients, not from the Portuguese, not from the Spanish, but from maps older still. You imagine these ancient charts, perhaps drawn on materials long turned to dust passing from one civilization to another, copied and recopied until their origins were forgotten. And with each copy, the knowledge travelled farther from its source, yet somehow the shape of that southern coast remained. If it were only this one detail, perhaps you could accept it as a curiosity. But there are other things on the map that tug at your attention. Small islands that appear in the wrong places, drawn with such confidence you wonder what sailor claimed to have seen them. Coastlines that are more accurate than they should be for 1513, drawn with a precision Europe would not achieve again for centuries. You glance toward the upper edge of the parchment, where Africa's western coast is depicted. The bulge of the continent is perfect in proportion, its placement in relation to South America uncannily close to modern maps. How could this be, when calculating precise longitude was still centuries away? The tools of the time could measure latitude with some accuracy, but longitude measuring east-west position was a far more elusive challenge. And yet, here it is, mapped as though the problem had been solved long before the invention of the chronometer. The anomalies pile up quietly, like stones at the edge of a path. None of them alone would be enough to demand a new history, but together they form a pattern, a faint outline of something larger. you find yourself stepping back, not physically, but in your thoughts, trying to see the whole picture. A fragment of a map made in 1513 based on older charts that may have been based on still older ones. Somewhere along that chain, someone saw these lands not as guesses but as they truly were. Your breathing slows, and the world outside this room fades even further. The lamp's glow seems warmer now, the shadows deeper. The air feels charged, not with fear, but with the kind of anticipation you feel when you're on the edge of discovering something important. You can almost hear the murmurs of the past sailors describing coasts to a cartographer, a navigator sketching an island from the deck of his ship, an ancient scholar copying from a crumbling map brought by traders from far-off shores. You think of the ocean itself, how it holds memories in its depths, sunken cities, drowned coastlines, the remains of places that once stood above the waves. If the map is an echo of such a world, then perhaps what it shows is not just a land forgotten by history, but a land erased by the sea. Your mind drifts again to the southern coast at the bottom of the parchment. You picture it not under ice, but alive with life. Forests stretching inland, mountains sharp against a pale sky, rivers running to the sea. Perhaps there were people there once, their lives and stories now lost to time. The thought sends a quiet shiver through you, not of fear, but of awe. The official story said the southern shape was an error, but errors are rarely so consistent, so deliberate. You wonder how many others have stood where you are now, staring at these same lines, feeling the same quiet doubt, and choosing not to speak it aloud. Because to question the official account is to open a door, and behind that door lies a much older, much stranger history. You take another slow breath. The air in the chamber feels almost alive, as though the map has been waiting for you to notice these details. The stillness deepens, and you feel the weight of centuries pressing close. Somewhere in that weight is a truth, one that does not fit neatly into the books, one that lives in the shadows between what we know and what we think we know. And so, you stand with the map, caught between the certainty of the official history and the pull of these early clues of anomaly. You do not have to decide which is true. You only have to keep listening, keep looking, keep following the faint trail of detail after detail until the story begins to reveal itself. The map waits, the lamp burns low, and outside this quiet place, the world turns on, unaware of the silent puzzle hidden here beneath the stone. You can feel the shift now. The clues you noticed earlier have taken root, and the official history, steady and polished, has begun to feel less like a final truth and more like a surface layer. Beneath it, something older is stirring. The air in the vault is still, yet there's a weight to it, as if the walls themselves are listening for what you will see next. You look back to the map, and the southern coastline at the bottom seems to meet your gaze in silence, as if it knows it's the reason you're here. This is where the anomalies become harder to dismiss. These aren't small curiosities or vague coincidences anymore. These are details that tug directly at the edges of what should be possible. Your eyes trace the length of the southern landmass, from its wide western curve to the narrowing eastern end. In the official story, this is nothing but the guesswork of a 16th century cartographer. But what if it isn't? What if this is not just a coastline imagined by sailors, but an actual depiction of a land as it truly was? And a land that no one in 1513 should have known so well? It's here that the whispers of modern study begin to rise in your mind. In the mid-20th century, Scientists examined this portion of the map and compared it to seismic surveys taken from Antarctica's coast. And here's the detail that lodges in your thoughts. The match wasn't to the current coastline, buried under miles of ice. It was to the subglacial bedrock, to the shape of the land as it would appear without the ice sheet at all. You let that sink in. The ice covering Antarctica is not thin. It's thick enough to bury entire mountain ranges, and it has been there for thousands upon thousands of years. For the map to show the bedrock as it is now under that ice, it would have to be based on a survey made when the continent was ice-free. But according to our accepted history, that would mean a map an accurate one dating back tens of thousands of years. The air seems to hum faintly in your ears as you think about it. You know that mainstream scholars have explanations for these findings, misinterpretations, accidental matches, the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. And yet, as you stare at those lines, that explanation feels thin. The bays and inlets are too precise, the proportions too exact, the angles too deliberate. You shift your gaze upward on the parchment to South America's eastern coast. The shape is sharp, almost modern. Not the crude guesswork one would expect from the early 1500s. And more than that, the map shows the continent extending farther south than the known exploration of the time would suggest. If the southernmost regions hadn't yet been charted by European sailors, then where did this knowledge come from? Your mind begins to paint a picture of possible origins. Ancient mariners sailing from a time before the great ice sheets formed, mapping coastlines in warm, ice-free seas. Perhaps they belong to a civilization we've never found, their ships tracing the edges of continents long before ours. Or perhaps the source wasn't even human as we understand it, but something else, something capable of creating maps with methods and precision far beyond what we think existed. You can almost see them now, a vessel gliding over calm waters, sails snapping in the wind, navigators leaning over crude but astonishingly accurate charts, measuring angles by the stars, plotting courses to lands that would one day be buried under ice. The image feels more real than it should. It lingers in your mind like a memory you aren't sure is yours. And yet the anomalies don't stop with the coastlines. There are islands here, small, oddly placed, that match no known land masses today. Some may be the results of copying errors, but others could be hints of lands that have since slipped beneath the ocean. Plate tectonics, rising seas, catastrophic floods, all could erase a coastline in the space of a geological heartbeat. What if these islands are the last ghostly marks of places that no longer exist? You let your thoughts drift wider, beyond just the Piri Reis map, and into the knowledge it might connect to. Ancient maps from other times and places, the Orontesvine map, the Boache map, also depict strange southern continents in surprising detail long before Antarctica was officially discovered. What if these aren't isolated oddities? What if they're fragments of a much older archive, one we've only glimpsed in scattered pieces? The lamp's flame dances faintly, casting long shadows across the parchment. You find yourself leaning closer, feeling as though you could step right into the lines of ink and walk along those coasts. You imagine your feet crunching on gravel beaches where ice now looms hundreds of meters high. You imagine inland valleys filled with forests, rivers tumbling over cliffs, and skies alive with birds no one has seen in thousands of years. The map doesn't just record a place, it seems to breathe it. But there's another layer to the anomaly, one that creeps in slowly, like the tide. If this map truly records an ice-free Antarctica, then whoever made the original survey had to possess more than seafaring skill. They would have needed precise navigation methods, accurate latitude and longitude measurements to place the coasts correctly relative to the rest of the world. Such methods, we are told, didn't exist until the 18th century. The implication is unsettling. Either our understanding of ancient technology is incomplete, or we have overlooked entire chapters of human capability. You glance again at the surrounding coasts, the accuracy in Africa's western edge, the relative positioning of South America, even the spacing of the Atlantic islands. These aren't the scattered guesses of a mapmaker stitching rumours together. They're the careful placement of someone working from real, measured data. The thought sends a subtle chill through you, not of fear, but of standing at the edge of something vast. And through it all, the official explanations echo faintly errors, artistic liberties, the human tendency to connect dots that don't belong together. Perhaps those explanations are right. Perhaps these matches are only accidents of history. But as you look at the map, you feel the resistance in your own mind. The way these lines seem to fit together too cleanly to be chance. The way the map seems to carry not just ink, but memory. You lean back slightly, feeling the stone wall behind you, cool and steady. The vault is quiet except for your breathing. The map lies still. Patient as always, the lamp's glow washing over its surface. You can't help but think of it as a messenger from another time, one that doesn't speak in words, but in coastlines, in shapes, in the faint curves of bays that no longer meet the sea. Somewhere in this tangle of anomalies there is a truth waiting. Whether it's the echo of a forgotten civilization, the survival of ancient knowledge, or something stranger still, you can't yet say. All you know is that these details refuse to be silenced. The map holds them close, guarding them, letting them slip only to those who linger long enough to notice. Tonight, in this quiet, you've noticed. And now, the map has more to show. The anomalies have drawn you in, each one like a pebble dropped into a still pond, sending ripples through the neat surface of the official history. But there is another current beneath those ripples. Deeper still, a current made not of maps or measurements, but of stories. Stories whispered from one generation to the next, passed along in fireside conversations, sung in the rhythm of work songs, etched into carvings, or folded into myths. If the Piri Reis map truly carries echoes of a far older world, then somewhere, in the voices of those who came before us, the same echoes might remain. You stand before the map, the lamp's glow brushing over its faded pigments, and let your thoughts slip beyond the parchment. You imagine the places it depicts not as lines and shapes, but as living lands. And then, as though following a thread, you picture the people who might have once walked those shores, fishermen pulling nets heavy with silver-scaled catch, children chasing seabirds across the sand, elders gathering under the night sky to tell of the world's beginning. In many traditions, the beginning is not a single moment, but a cycle. Worlds rise and fall, seas come and go, and people are born into lands that will one day be swallowed by the ocean or buried under ice. Across the globe there are myths of lands that vanished. Atlantis in the west, Lemuria in the east, the sunken cities of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Though separated by oceans and centuries, these tales share a strange familiarity, a memory of somewhere that was here and then was gone. Your mind drifts to the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote of Atlantis as a great island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. Many have dismissed his account as allegory, yet the shape of the Piri Reis map's southern landmass stirs the thought, what if such stories, however embellished, carry within them a seed of truth? The map's own creator left clues in his handwriting. Along the margins, Piri Reis notes that parts of his chart were based on maps from the time of Alexander and even earlier. He writes of sailors' reports and of strange sources brought to the Ottoman court sources that were themselves copies of copies, stretching back into an age when the earth was seen differently. He does not claim to understand them fully. He only records them as though preserving a rumour too persistent to ignore. And then there are the voices from the far south, much farther than Piri's ships ever sailed. Among the native peoples of South America, in Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, there are fragments of oral traditions that speak of a white land beyond the southern seas, a place of great mountains and wide plains where the sun sometimes never set and sometimes never rose. Some tell of travellers from this place who came in ancient times, bringing knowledge of the stars and the seasons. From the Pacific comes another echo. The Maori of New Zealand speak of a homeland far to the south, now lost beneath waves and storms. Polynesian wayfinders, masters of open ocean navigation, tell of islands seen by their ancestors that no longer exist, swept away by the sea or hidden beneath the horizon forever. And in the frozen north, where the Inuit tell stories of migrations and ancient hunts, there are also tales of lands that were warm once, before the great cold came. They speak of moving south, of carrying knowledge with them, perhaps the same knowledge that, in some distant thread of connection, found its way into maps no one can fully explain. These voices, scattered across the globe, are like stars in the night sky, each one distant, but together forming constellations of memory. The Piri Reis map could be one such constellation, its lines a silent counterpart to the spoken word, preserving the same story in a different language. You imagine yourself seated by a fire thousands of years ago, listening to an elder speak in a tongue you don't know, but somehow understand. They gesture to the horizon, to the wind, to the stars, and tell of journeys to a place far away, a place of green valleys and stone cliffs, a place where rivers cut deep into the land, a place that is now only in memory. In that firelight the story feels real, as if the heat on your face is the same warmth that once touched the skin of those who lived in that land. Back in the vault, you blink slowly, the sound of the imagined fire fading into the still air. The map rests quietly before you, but the voices feel close. You wonder how many other maps have been lost, maps that might have shown the same southern coast now gone forever, leaving only their ghost in myths and legends. Even the explorers of more recent centuries sometimes caught glimpses of something unusual. A 19th century whaling logbook tells of mountains glimpsed in the far south, where there should have been only ice. A captain's journal mentions strange warm currents far below the known limits of temperate seas. Most such accounts were forgotten or dismissed. But perhaps, like folklore, they are fragments of a larger story waiting to be pieced together. You step back from the table, letting your eyes adjust to the dimness beyond the lamp's glow. In the soft dark, the map feels less like an object and more like a presence, one that has absorbed not just lines and coastlines, but the weight of centuries of human wonder. It is more than pigment on parchment. It is a vessel for memory. The thought settles over you gently. Maybe the oldest truths are not written at all, but told in the pauses between words, in the rhythm of waves, in the way a navigator tilts their head to read the wind. The Piri Reis map, for all its precision and ink, may simply be another way of telling a story that has been told countless times before of lands we once knew and then forgot. The fire in your imagined vision flickers again in your mind. The elder finishes their tale, the last sparks drifting into the night. You realize the story doesn't end, it simply folds into the next, just as one map is drawn atop another and another. The knowledge is never gone, it only waits for someone to see it. You look down at the southern coast on the map one more time. It no longer feels like a cold, distant shape. It feels inhabited not by people you can name, but by the presence of their memory, by the weight of their journeys, by the certainty that they were here long before anyone thought they could be. And as you stand there in the vault, the silence around you deep and warm, you can almost hear their voices blending into the hum of the centuries. They are not gone, they're only waiting. The voices of old myth still seem to linger in the air, fading only enough to let you hear the quiet pulse of the room again. You followed them across oceans and through centuries, feeling their echoes align with the strange lines on the Piri Reis map. And now the thought comes to you like the steady turning of a compass needle. If these stories exist in so many places, could there be other maps, other records carrying the same mystery? The idea doesn't feel far-fetched at all. In fact, it feels inevitable. If the Piri Reis map is a fragment of something older, then somewhere out there, other fragments must exist too. And when you bring them together, like pieces of a scattered puzzle, the image they form might be something far larger than any single chart. Your eyes close for a moment, and in that darkness, the map before you shifts and changes. Its lines dissolve into the shapes of other maps, similar yet distinct, appearing one after another like waves rolling to shore. The first is the Oronce Fine map of 1531, its delicate curves drawn just 18 years after Piri Reis completed his chart. At its base is a great southern continent, sprawling across the bottom of the page, drawn with confidence. It is called Terra Australis, the southern land, and its edges are adorned with mountain ranges, rivers and forests, features no European had ever seen. Mainstream historians say this was guesswork, an imagined counterbalance to the continents in the north. But the shape is uncanny, echoing coastlines that would not be mapped accurately for centuries. Then the Boache map of 1737 comes into view, drawn 200 years later. It is even stranger. Boache, a French geographer, depicts a southern continent split into two large land masses, separated by a sea running through its centre. When the Antarctic ice sheet was surveyed by radar in the 20th century, scientists discovered that beneath the ice, the bedrock does indeed have two main masses, divided by a great mountain range and low-lying basins, eerily similar to what Boache had drawn. Your thoughts drift further back in time, beyond printed charts to ancient carvings and temple inscriptions. In Ptolemaic Egypt, maps of the known world included speculative southern lands, their shapes suspiciously similar to later European depictions. In ancient Babylon, clay tablets show stars and constellations, but some scholars believe the same tablets also encode directional references to faraway lands. In Polynesia, navigators mapped the ocean not with ink and parchment, but with stick charts, carefully bent and lashed strips of palm wood representing currents, swells, and islands. They could travel thousands of miles without a compass, guided only by stars, waves, and memory. And there are older echoes, still so old, they blur the line between artifact and legend. In the Indus Valley, a small stone seal shows a carefully etched grid with shapes that might represent shorelines. In South America, ancient geoglyphs stretch across the Nazca Desert, lines so straight and vast that they seem as though they could be flight paths or markers for a map only visible from the sky. One by one, these fragments pass before your mind's eye. Alone, each can be explained away: mistaken identity, artistic flourish, coincidence. But together, they form a quiet chorus. The same southern curve appears again and again, like a faint memory surfacing through time. The same hints of lands that should not be known, yet are drawn with confidence. You open your eyes, the vision fading back into the steady glow of the lamp. The Piri Reis map lies unchanged before you, but now it feels less solitary. You see it as part of a network, an unbroken chain of knowledge passed hand to hand, language to language, culture to culture. Sometimes the chain is bright and obvious. Other times it dips into darkness for centuries before resurfacing again. Your mind wanders to the possibility that these connections weren't accidents. Imagine a time before the last great ice age, when sea levels were lower and continents looked different. Perhaps there were civilizations then, seafaring ones, who mapped the world and passed that knowledge forward. When the seas rose, when climates shifted, their cities may have vanished, but their charts could have survived in small, precious numbers. Over millennia, they might have been copied into newer forms, updated, combined with local knowledge, until what began as a survey of an ancient coastline became a strange, out-of-place detail on a much later map. And if that is true, then the Piri Reis map is not the beginning of the story, but one of the last surviving pages of it. The other pages are scattered across the globe in old libraries, temple vaults, private collections, and in the unbroken oral traditions of navigators and storytellers. You picture a scholar in the 18th century unrolling the Boacha map, feeling the same odd tug of recognition you feel now. You imagine a Polynesian elder tracing the lines of a stick chart, pointing toward a place beyond the horizon. You see an Egyptian priest standing in the flicker of torchlight, marking a curve on a papyrus scroll with a reed pen. Each of them is holding a fragment, a single note in the same song. The more you think about it, the more you realize this isn't just about Antarctica or about one mysterious map. It's about the possibility of a shared memory that crosses all boundaries, geographic, cultural, even chronological, a memory of the Earth as it once was, and perhaps of how it was lost. The vault feels warmer now, the air thicker with that idea. You glance at the southern coastline again. It no longer feels like a lonely shape at the bottom of a chart. It feels like a signal, something deliberately preserved, like a beacon to those who know how to see it. You take a long, slow breath, letting the idea settle deep. Outside this room, history is divided neatly into eras and epochs, as though time were a line running only forward. But in here, surrounded by these echoes, time feels more like a circle. The past and the present meet in the lines of this map, just as they meet in the shared shapes across maps drawn centuries apart. You can almost hear the ocean beyond the stone walls, a faint, rhythmic hush, like the turning of pages. Each wave is another record, another chart, another story waiting to surface. And the Piri Reis map, with all its questions and contradictions, is simply the one that found its way to you tonight. The thought brings a quiet calm. You don't need to have every answer. You only need to follow the shapes, to notice the connections, to let the fragments guide you. Somewhere beyond this vault in the scattered libraries of the world, the rest of the puzzle is still waiting, and perhaps one day someone will bring it all together again. For now, you stand before the Piri Reis map, knowing it is not alone. It is part of something vast, something hidden in plain sight. A chorus of maps and memories, all whispering the same question through the centuries. Do you remember? The vault is utterly still, yet your mind is alive with the maps you've seen in your thoughts. Piri Reis, Orontsvine, Boache, the ancient charts lost to dust and fire. They form a constellation of echoes, all pointing toward a deeper truth. And yet, as powerful as these connections feel, you know the human mind is drawn to patterns, even where none exist. For every theory that suggests a hidden history, there is another that holds the line of reason. This is the place where the road splits. One path lined with the signposts of mainstream explanation, the other disappearing into the mists of speculation. You can walk both in your thoughts tonight, letting them wind together like twin rivers that sometimes merge, sometimes drift apart. The mainstream voice begins first, calm and measured. The Piri Reis map, it says, is the product of a gifted compiler in the early 1500s. Piri himself admits in his notes that he worked from around 20 source maps, some of which were already outdated or incomplete. A few of these charts may have contained speculative coastlines, drawn to fill blank spaces. Cartographers of the time often extended known coasts into the unknown, imagining what might lie beyond. The mysterious southern continent, in this view, is simply an exaggerated or misinterpreted extension of South America, drawn before explorers knew where it truly ended. And the details that seem too accurate for the time, the voice of reason offers an explanation. Some Portuguese and Spanish voyages may have reached farther south than the historical record suggests. They could have sighted portions of ice-free coastline in the austral summer, when parts of the Antarctic Peninsula are briefly visible. These glimpses, combined with guesswork, might have been enough to inspire the shape seen on Piri's chart. Even the supposed match to subglacial topography has its rebuttal. Patterns in coastlines can resemble one another purely by chance, and when only fragments of a map survive, the temptation to match them to modern data is strong. Correlation, the scholarly voice reminds you, is not proof. You let these arguments settle in the air like evenly spaced stones. They're not unconvincing. In fact, they carry the weight of careful logic. And yet, the other path waits. The path where speculation thrives, where logic is stretched to make room for possibilities too large to ignore. On this path, the Piri Reis map is more than a clever compilation. It's a window. A surviving shard of a knowledge system far older than the Ottoman Empire, older even than the civilizations that built the pyramids or raised stone monoliths in forgotten forests. If it truly depicts an ice-free Antarctica, then its source material must predate the last glacial maximum, meaning it comes from a time when humans were not supposed to have such capabilities. This theory unfolds like a story in your mind. Imagine an advanced maritime culture flourishing tens of thousands of years ago. They had no satellites, no engines, but they had perfected navigation through a mastery of astronomy, geometry, and long-range seafaring. They mapped coastlines with precision, recording bays, capes, and mountain ranges. Their charts were prized, copied, and passed down through generations. When cataclysm came, whether sudden floods, shifting continents, or the creeping advance of ice, the civilization vanished, but fragments of their knowledge survived. Over millennia, those fragments travelled, changing hands from sailors to merchants, from one empire to the next. By the time they reached Piri-Reis, they were already ancient, and yet their accuracy endured. He copied what he saw faithfully, perhaps without understanding its true age or significance. And so, a memory from a world long gone slipped quietly into the archives of the Ottoman court. But some take the speculation even further. What if the source of this knowledge was not entirely human? Could there have been contact long before recorded history between humanity and an older, more advanced species? Some suggest these were visitors from distant stars. Others propose they were simply a branch of humanity that rose and fell before ours, leaving behind only whispers in stone and ink. The vault seems to hold both paths at once. The careful, academic voice that warns against leaping to conclusions, and the more daring voice that urges you to see beyond the horizon of accepted history. Each has its pull. The rational path offers security, the comfort of fitting the map neatly into what we already know. The speculative path offers wonder, the thrill of discovering that the world is stranger than we dared to imagine. You realize that you don't have to choose between them. You can hold both in your hands, just as Piri held both old maps and new. You can walk between the line of fact and possibility, letting them overlap and blur, knowing that somewhere in that overlap lies the truth. The lamp flickers, and you imagine Piri himself at his work table. Did he wonder where his source maps came from? Did he feel the weight of their strangeness? Or was he so accustomed to blending the old with the new that he thought nothing of it? Perhaps, like you, he moved between certainty and curiosity, never fully satisfied with either. You step back from the table, letting your gaze wander the stone walls of the vault. This room, too, holds both truths and mysteries. You can see the marks of modern restoration alongside the deep wear of centuries. The stones are solid, unmoving, yet the air between them carries the faint hum of stories that have passed this way. Somewhere outside, the city sleeps. The Bosphorus drifts under moonlight, its currents as old as the first sailors who mapped them, and here, in this quiet chamber, a single piece of parchment lies between two worlds, one of measured history, one of open-ended possibility. You feel the pull of both. The scholar in you wants to catalogue, verify, and explain. The dreamer in you wants to set sail on the currents of speculation, chasing the ghost of a civilization across uncharted seas, and perhaps, in the end, both are needed. Without reason, curiosity loses its anchor. Without curiosity, reason forgets to look beyond the horizon. As you stand there, you sense the map's quiet patience. It will not tell you which path is right. It will not give you the missing pages. It will only offer its lines, its shapes, its faintly faded coasts, and leave the rest to you. You let your breath slow, your shoulders soften. You can walk further into either path when you choose, but for now, you are content to stand in the space between. The space where both the scholar and the dreamer are welcome. The space where the map still breathes. The air in the vault feels heavier now, as though the map itself has been listening to your thoughts, hearing you weigh the calm of reason against the pull of wonder. But in that stillness, another thread of the story begins to rise. It is quieter, harder to catch, like a murmur behind a closed door, and yet once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. It is the suggestion that perhaps the anomalies in the Piri Reis map aren't just a matter of scholarly debate or ancient mystery. Perhaps they are something someone somewhere would prefer to keep quiet. Suppression, hidden knowledge. The words carry a different kind of weight. Not the weight of myth or speculation, but the kind of heaviness that comes when truth brushes against power. You lean closer to the map again, studying its lines. On the surface, it is simply an artifact in a museum vault accessible to researchers, photographed and published in books. But not every part of its story has been told widely, and not every detail is given equal attention. You begin to wonder, why? When the map was rediscovered in 1929, tucked among the collections of the Topkapi Palace, it quickly attracted curiosity not just from historians, but from geographers and even military cartographers. One of the most famous voices to comment on it was Charles Hapgood, the American historian who, in the mid-20th century, argued that the map might preserve the knowledge of an ancient advanced civilization. His work drew the attention of US Air Force cartographers, who compared the map's southern coastline to seismic data from Antarctica and found the similarities worth noting. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the discussion might break open into something larger, but instead, Hapgood's claims were quickly labelled as fringe, relegated to the margins of academic discourse. The mainstream narrative closed its ranks. The southern continent was an error, the details coincidence, the idea of an ancient ice-free survey unworthy of serious consideration. You've read enough history to know that skepticism is natural, even healthy. But there is a difference between skepticism and dismissal, and sometimes dismissal is convenient. Admitting that a 500-year-old map might contain details impossible for its time would raise too many questions, not only about history, but about the authority of those who tell it. In your mind, you see two worlds. In one, the Piri Reis map is treated as a curiosity, its anomalies explained away in tidy footnotes, its stranger details mentioned only in passing. In the other, those anomalies are placed at the centre of the investigation, studied openly, compared with other maps, and questioned without fear of where the answers might lead. The first world is the one we live in. The second is harder to imagine, perhaps because it would challenge so many pillars of what we are taught to believe. Suppression doesn't always mean burning books or hiding artifacts in locked rooms. Sometimes it is subtler, a choice not to fund certain research, a decision to steer students towards safer topics, the quiet pressure to keep careers within the bounds of acceptable theory. For a young archaeologist or historian, the risk of being labelled unorthodox can be enough to keep them from speaking too loudly about inconvenient findings. You wonder how many have stood where you are now in this vault, looking at the Piri Reis map and thinking the same thoughts you're having. How many have noticed the curves of that southern coastline and felt the pull of questions they know they shouldn't ask? The map itself offers no answers. It does not care who studies it or who tries to explain it away. It has survived centuries of storms, wars, and neglect. It'll survive whatever silence we place around it. And yet, as you study its lines, you can't help but feel that it deserves to be seen in full, without filters or footnotes that flatten its mystery into something manageable. Perhaps it is human nature to guard what we think we know, to protect our established timelines, our carefully built structures of knowledge. After all, If the Piri Reis map truly shows an ice-free Antarctica, then every textbook, every lecture, every historical model of human development would have to shift. That kind of shift doesn't happen easily. It threatens reputations, rewrites careers, and unsettles the comfort of certainty. And so, the easier path is to keep the anomaly in its box, to let the official history stand, to mention the oddities only in passing, to let the centuries dull their edges until they no longer catch the light. But you are not here for the easier path. You're here in the quiet, in the company of the map itself, and you can feel that its edges are still sharp. The longer you look, the more it feels as though the map is not just a record of places, but a record of how knowledge survives, sometimes openly, sometimes in shadows. Your mind drifts to other stories of suppression in history, manuscripts locked away for centuries in monastery libraries, revealed only when political climates shifted, artifacts that vanished into private collections, their existence known only through a passing mention in an old traveller's diary. Excavations halted mid-dig when their discoveries threatened to overturn accepted narratives. Each of these stories is a reminder that history is not just about what happened, but about what is allowed to be told. You take a deep breath, letting the stillness of the vault settle around you again. Suppression is not an answer, it is only a delay. The truth, whatever it is, waits patiently. The map has waited over 500 years already. If it carries a message from a much older time, then it has waited far longer than that. And perhaps you think the map's survival is itself an act of quiet defiance. It should have been lost, destroyed, or forgotten. Instead, it sits here, intact enough for you to run your eyes over its impossible lines. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And sometimes, whispers last longer than the loudest proclamations. You lean back from the table, your eyes still on that southern coast. Whether by accident or intention, the map has carried something through centuries of change, something that doesn't quite fit. And in the gap between what is known and what is allowed to be known, there is space for questions. You feel that space widening now. It isn't threatening, it's quiet, like the horizon before dawn. And in that quiet you hear the map's silence not as emptiness, but as an invitation to keep looking, to keep asking, even when the answers are slow to come. The lamp flickers, casting a brief shadow over the southern landmass, as though hiding it for just a moment. When the light steadies again, the coast is there as it has always been, waiting, unchanged. You know it will still be there tomorrow, and the day after, and long after you are gone. And perhaps that is the greatest defiance of all, simply to endure, unaltered, until the day someone is ready to listen without fear. The thought of hidden truths lingers with you long after it's spoken aloud in your mind, and you find yourself wondering about those who came before, those who saw what the Piri Reis map seemed to show and dared to follow it further. You imagine their names written not in official histories but in the margins of forgotten books, in obscure articles tucked away in dusty archives. People who took the risk of asking, what if this is real? One figure begins to take shape in your thoughts. Charles Hapgood, the mid-20th century historian whose work became forever entwined with this map's mystery. He was not a sailor or a cartographer by trade. He was a teacher, a thinker, someone drawn to the edges of what the textbooks allowed. In the 1950s and 60s, Hapgood developed a theory he called Earth crust displacement, the idea that the outer shell of the Earth could shift suddenly, moving entire continents to new latitudes in a geological instant. It was a theory meant to explain climate changes and ancient anomalies, but for Hapgood, the Piri Reis map was a piece of evidence that seemed to fit. He studied it intensely, noting the accuracy of its South American coast, the strange southern landmass, and the possibility that it depicted Antarctica without ice. He reached out to the US Air Force for technical evaluation. Their cartographers examined the southern coastline on the map, comparing it to newly gathered seismic data. The result, according to Hapgood, was confirmation that the shapes matched the bedrock profile beneath Antarctica's ice. For a moment, it must have felt like a breakthrough, a door cracking open. Here was military validation of an anomaly that could change our understanding of human history, and yet, instead of celebration, the findings slid quietly into obscurity. Official acknowledgement never went further. Hapgood published his work, but the academic world largely dismissed it. To most scholars, his theories were too radical, too disruptive to the agreed timeline of human civilization. You imagine Hapgood at his desk, the map spread before him, running his fingers over the same southern coastline you see now. Perhaps he felt the same sense of standing on a threshold, the same hum of possibility in his chest, and perhaps he also felt the chill of resistance, the walls that rise when established truths are challenged. Hapgood wasn't the only one. You think of the 19th century explorers who sailed south into icy waters, chasing rumours of land beyond the known maps. Some claim to see mountain ranges where later expeditions found only ice glimpses of an Antarctica briefly exposed in warmer seasons, or perhaps mirages born of wind and light. Their accounts were often buried in naval logs or dismissed as navigational errors. Even earlier in the age of sail, there were captains who returned from voyages with tales of strange lands at extreme latitudes, lands lush enough to seem out of place in the southern seas. Some of these men carried sketches, rough charts passed from one ship's master to another, eventually finding their way to mapmakers in Europe or the Ottoman Empire. By the time Piri Reis saw them, the origin stories may already have been fading. You can almost see it, the slow chain of hands, each passing along a fragment. An early navigator charts an unfamiliar coast. His map survives long enough to be copied into another, where it is combined with newer discoveries. That version crosses into another language, another script, another empire. Decades or centuries later, it ends up on Piri Reis's table, stripped of context but rich with detail. And behind all of this, you sense the lives of those who made the discoveries and kept the records, the sailors standing on decks under alien stars, the cartographers bent over tables in dim rooms, the archivists who carefully rolled and stored each chart, not knowing if it would ever be read again. Some of them must have known they were preserving something unusual, something that did not fit. But perhaps they also knew that not every truth can be spoken in its time. Your thoughts drift to the rediscovery of the Piri Reis map in 1929. It happened almost by accident during cataloguing work in the Topkapi Palace. The archivist who unrolled it that day might have been the first in centuries to see its southern coastline. Imagine their curiosity. Was it confusion, excitement, or simply the professional interest of those tasked with identifying an old artifact? Whatever they felt, it set in motion the modern conversation about this map's strange contents. From that moment forward, the map became both a treasure and a burden. For those seeking conventional history, it was a rare, well-preserved example of early 16th century cartography. For those seeking something more, It was a tantalizing clue pointing toward a deeper past. And for those caught in between scholars like Hapgood, it was both. A beautiful artifact and a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. You feel a kind of kinship with these forgotten explorers and researchers. None of them could hold the whole story in their hands. Each saw only part of it, perhaps no more than you see now. But each carried the same question forward, even if they couldn't speak it loudly. What if this means more than we think? In the vault, the silence wraps around you. You can almost hear the pages turning in old libraries, the scratching of pens on parchment, the creak of ships' timbers as they sailed into the unknown. All of it, centuries of searching, of recording, of preserving, has led to this moment, to you standing here in front of this fragment of gazelle skin parchment. You wonder if future generations will remember the names of those who tried to tell this story before it was welcome to be heard. Will they remember the explorers who saw more than they were meant to? The archivists who preserved without erasing? The historians who risked their credibility for a possibility too vast to ignore? Or will they too be footnotes, their voices faint but still carrying through time? For now, you hold them in your mind. Hapgood at his desk, the nameless sailors scanning the horizon, the cartographers working by candlelight. They are all part of the same chain, the same fragile thread of curiosity that has kept the map alive. And as you look again at the lines before you, you know that you have joined them, not in solving the mystery, but in keeping it alive until the day someone can. The lamp's flame sways slightly, as if a breeze has slipped into the vault. For a heartbeat, you imagine it's the breath of all those who came before, leaning in to see what you will do next. You steady yourself, knowing the story is far from over. There are still more pages to turn. The vault seems even quieter now, as if it too is listening for the next chapter in this story. The voices of long-gone explorers, archivists and scholars linger in your mind. But now the world beyond the past begins to press in. The present day, with its machines, its satellites, its power to see the unseen. You lean over the Piri-Reis map once more, letting your gaze linger on the familiar and the strange, and you wonder, what have we learned about these coasts since it was drawn? Not just from old ship logs or crumbling manuscripts, but from the eyes we have in the sky, from the instruments that can pierce through miles of ice, from the computer models that can reconstruct a world long gone. In the last few decades, technology has begun to peel back the veil over Antarctica in ways no human could have imagined when Piri's quill touched this parchment. Satellites have mapped its surface in intricate detail, tracking the movement of glaciers, the collapse of ice shelves, the slow breathing of the ice cap as it shifts and flows. But more telling still are the ice-penetrating radar's powerful pulses that pass through frozen layers to reveal the land beneath. What they've shown is both beautiful and haunting, a hidden continent of mountains and valleys, of plateaus and deep basins, of ancient river systems long since entombed. It is a place no human has seen with their own eyes in millions of years, and yet, when certain scientists compared its contours to that southern coast on the Piri-Reis map, they saw shapes that seemed to match. Not perfectly, not in every detail, but enough to stir that same old question. How could a 16th century mapmaker have drawn this without seeing it? Mainstream explanations still stand coincidence, misinterpretation, the tendency to find patterns where we want them to be. But modern tools have sharpened the outlines of the puzzle. With each new survey, the hidden Antarctica becomes more real, more tangible, and the similarities to the map feel harder to dismiss outright. It isn't just Antarctica that technology has illuminated. We have mapped the ocean floor with increasing precision, uncovering submerged ridges, plateaus, and even hints of ancient coastlines now hundreds of meters underwater. Some of these features align eerily with places marked on old maps as islands or shoals, long dismissed as errors. Could they be remnants of lands once known to ancient sailors, recorded and passed down through generations of copying? You picture modern researchers hunched over glowing monitors, scrolling across digital reconstructions of the Earth as it looked during past ice ages. Shorelines bulge outward where glaciers locked up the seas, exposing wide coastal plains. Islands swell into larger land masses, and land bridges stretch across what is now open ocean. Looking at these reconstructions is like stepping into the possible worlds, preserved in the oldest myths and in a few stubbornly strange maps. The most striking example is when scientists roll the clock back far enough to see Antarctica without ice. There, beneath the frozen white, is a land that looks startlingly alive. Mountain ranges crowned with jagged peaks, valleys carved by winding rivers, broad plains where life might once have thrived. In those moments, the image and the Piri Reis coastline seem to lean toward each other, their edges whispering in agreement. In the age of the internet, these comparisons travel quickly. A high-resolution image of the map sits beside a modern bedrock survey. The two shapes glowing in different colors, their curves aligned for the viewer to judge. To some, the resemblance is uncanny. To others, it is merely the mind's eye fitting shapes together, like clouds in the sky forming familiar figures. But whether believer or skeptic, everyone feels the same tug: curiosity. It's not only scientists and historians who have been drawn to the mystery. Independent researchers, amateur cartographers, and even remote sensing enthusiasts have joined the search. Using open-access satellite data, they scan the poles and the seas, hoping to spot features overlooked by larger institutions. Some share their findings in quiet online forums. Others post videos and maps, adding to the growing digital conversation about what these ancient charts might mean in the modern age. And yet, for all our technology, the heart of the puzzle remains the same as it was in 1513. We still do not know where Piri's source maps came from. We still do not know whether they were drawn from first-hand exploration, inherited from older civilizations, or pieced together from rumors and lucky guesses. All the satellites and sensors in the world can tell us what is there now, or what was there in the deep past, but they cannot tell us who first knew it, or how. You think about the strange symmetry of it all. In Piri's time, the newest maps were precious, copied by hand, guarded by courts and captains. Today, the newest data can be transmitted instantly around the globe, shared by anyone with a screen, and yet, both then and now, the same image emerges, a coastline drawn long before it should have been possible. The vault feels warmer with this thought, as if the centuries between you and Piri have folded in on themselves. You can imagine him holding one of his own source maps, studying its lines with the same blend of caution and wonder you feel now. Perhaps he too sensed that this was no ordinary chart. Perhaps he too wondered how many others had seen it before him, and how far back the chain stretched. And maybe, just maybe, someone far in the future will stand before a glowing screen, looking at a digital scan of this very parchment, and feel the same. The technology may change, the lamp's flicker replaced by the hum of servers, the parchment's texture replaced by pixels, but the questions will remain. Who made the first map of this place? When? And why? You let that thought settle, your breathing slow and steady. The tools we have today are sharper than ever, able to reach under ice through oceans and into the past. But no matter how deep we look, we are still explorers, standing on the deck of a ship at the edge of an unknown coast, staring at a shape that both invites and refuses explanation. The lamp casts a steady glow over the Piri Reis map, its lines unchanged, its secrets intact. The hum of technology is far away here, but its presence is woven into your thoughts. You know that tomorrow, next year, decades from now, there will be more scans, more comparisons, more debates, and maybe one day the missing piece will be found, not just in the ice or the ocean, but in a dusty archive, in a chart so old it should not have survived, yet did. Until then, the map waits. Modern eyes have revealed more of its possible truth than ever before, but the final answer remains just out of reach, like a coastline glimpsed through fog. And perhaps that is why it still holds us, because in a world where so much is known, the Piri Reis map reminds us that some mysteries refuse to be mapped completely. You stand there in the vault, the map steady before you, and the quiet feels almost like a pause in a long conversation. All the history, the anomalies, the echoes of other maps, the whispers of suppression, the explorers who came before, and the reach of modern technology. They've all been building to this moment. You realize it's time to step back and ask the question in its fullest form, not as an idle thought, but as something big enough to hold everything you've felt tonight. We've looked at this fragment from every angle we can, as a document of its time, as a survivor from an earlier age, as a puzzle in plain sight. We've seen how it fits into official history, and how it strains against it. We've traced the threads that might connect it to myths, to other maps, to modern science. And now we ask, together, what if this is not the beginning of the story at all, but one of the last surviving lines in a script written thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years ago? What if we are not the first? The thought moves through you like a tide. You picture humanity not as a straight climb from darkness into light, but as a series of cycles, civilizations rising, learning, exploring, mapping the world, then falling, their knowledge scattered like leaves in the wind. Perhaps the Piri Reis map is a leaf from one such autumn, carried forward until it found its way into Piri's hands. And if that's true, then what does it mean for us now? It means our story might not be unique. It means that everything we have built, the satellites, the cities, the science, could be just another crest before the next fall. Not an end, but a chapter. And perhaps the same way we search for traces of those before us, someone far in the future will search for traces of us. You let the thought deepen. What if the lands on this map that seem unknown to us were not unknown to them? What if they were home lived in, mapped in detail, named in languages now lost? What if the coastline we call Antarctica was once a fertile shore where ships came and went, where settlements flourished under skies free of ice? We might never know their names, their faces, or their stories. But the fact that a piece of their world may have survived on this map means they are not entirely gone. A fragment of their work, perhaps copied 100 times across centuries, still speaks to us, even if it speaks in shapes and lines instead of words. You feel the strangeness of it, the sense that this moment is bigger than a single mystery. If such a fragment could survive from a time we've forgotten, how much else might be out there? Not just in vaults and libraries, but buried in seabeds, under ice sheets, or hidden in mountains. Knowledge waiting, patient, until it's found. And then another question slips in, one that feels heavier, more urgent. If there have been others before us, what happened to them? Was it a natural shift, the slow turning of climate, the rise of seas, the advance of ice? Or was it something they brought on themselves? War, resource exhaustion, a failure to see their own limits. You wonder if they left warnings hidden in the maps they passed down, messages we've yet to understand. The Piri Reis map doesn't give you an answer. It doesn't give anyone an answer. But it does what all great mysteries do. It makes the question impossible to forget. And in a way, that might be its true purpose. You glance at the southern coastline again, the one that started this entire journey tonight. It seems unchanged, but something in you has shifted. It no longer feels like just an anomaly. It feels like a door. Not a door you can open easily, but one that exists whether or not you step through it. And then the we in your thoughts grows stronger. This isn't just your question, it's ours. All of ours. Everyone who has ever looked at the map and felt the same pull is part of this quiet fellowship. We are the ones standing on the shore of the known world, looking out across the sea of time, wondering what lies beyond the horizon. We don't have to agree on every detail. Some of us believe in a lost civilization. Some believe in extraordinary ancient explorers. Some keep to the cautious lines of established history. But in the end, we're joined by the same thing: curiosity. The refusal to stop looking just because the answer is not in the book. The willingness to sit in the dark with a question, even when the question refuses to answer. It's strange how comforting that feels. To know that even if the Piri Reis map's origin remains a mystery, the act of wondering about it keeps something alive in us, a recognition that our world still holds secrets, that we are still explorers, not just of land and sea, but of time itself. The vault feels warmer with that thought, as though the stones themselves approve. You imagine all of us, those before, those now, those to come, linked by the same curiosity. A chain that stretches back into the deep past and forward into the deep future, with each of us holding it for just a little while. What if, you whisper into the quiet, we are not the first, but merely the latest chapter in an endless cycle? The words sound both ancient and new, as though they've been spoken before, countless times, in countless places, and will be spoken again long after you're gone. The map does not answer. It doesn't need to. It simply lies there, a fragment of something far larger, content to wait for the next pair of eyes to stand where you are now and ask the same question. And as you look at it one last time before moving to the next part of the story, you feel that strange unity, that sense of we settle deep inside you. This is no longer just a mystery you are studying. It is a mystery we share. And perhaps that, more than anything, is why it still matters. The thought of we lingers in you, warm and steady, like an ember in a deep hearth. But as you stand there, you feel the pull to return not forward into speculation or outward into comparisons, but inward. Back to the beginning, back to you standing here alone in the dim glow, the map before you, the air still and heavy with the scent of parchment and oil. You let your shoulders drop, the tension melting away as though the vault itself has given you permission to relax. The stone beneath your feet feels solid, grounding you. The slow rhythm of your breathing is the only sound. You could almost drift off standing here, letting the quiet cradle you. You look again at the lines of the Piri Reis map. The southern coastline is still there, curved and confident, each bay and headland drawn with precision that should not belong to its time. But instead of puzzling over it, you just look. Let your eyes wander over the ink as though it were the edge of a real shore, and you were standing on a cliff above it, waves rolling in far below. You imagine being there, not in the cold and ice of today, but in whatever time this coastline may have truly belonged to. The air is cool but not freezing, the scent of salt sharp and alive. A faint breeze moves through grass that grows near the shore, and far inland, a dark line of mountains rises against a pale sky. Somewhere in those valleys, rivers rush toward the sea, carrying snowmelt to the bays. In your mind, the waves make a sound that echoes here in the vault. A steady hush, over and over, like the earth breathing. The oil lamp's flame wavers, and for a heartbeat, you feel as though the map itself is moving beneath your gaze, the coast shifting, the mountains rising higher, clouds gathering above them. You blink, and the vision fades, but the feeling remains. That quiet awe of standing before something that has outlived centuries, that has passed through so many hands, and still, here it is. It feels almost like standing at great threshold, half in the world, you know, half in a world you can only imagine. The room feels warmer now. Your breathing slows even more, and you feel the heaviness in your body, the way each muscle has loosened since you first walked down into this place. It's as if the map has been slowly unwinding you, drawing your attention away from everything else, until only this moment exists. You let your mind wander, not into theories or history, but into a softer kind of wondering. What if you could stay here for hours, just watching the coastline under the lamp's glow, letting it speak without trying to decode it? What if the best way to understand something this old is not to interrogate it, but to sit with it, the way you might sit beside a stream and listen? You notice small details now, the way the ink deepens in certain places, the tiny irregularities in the curves, the slight fraying of the parchment's edges where time has nibbled away. Even these imperfections feel like part of its truth. They are reminders that this is not a perfect object, frozen outside of time, but something that has lived through centuries of human care and neglect, of light and shadow, of eyes searching its surface for meaning. The longer you stand here, the more you feel the presence of those other eyes, those who looked before you, perhaps in curiosity, perhaps in reverence, perhaps in both. The vault becomes less of a solitary place and more of a gathering ground, though you can't see the others. You just feel them, as though you're part of a long, quiet procession that has come here to stand before this same fragment, each in their own moment, each feeling the same stillness wrap around them. Somewhere above, the city goes on cars, footsteps, voices, the hum of life in motion. Down here, there is none of that. There is only the map, the lamp, and the quiet. It is as though time has thinned in this room, stretched so fine you could step through it in either direction. And if you did, if you stepped back, where would you go? Would you find yourself in Piri's study, his tools laid out, the scent of fresh ink in the air? Would you go further to the unknown cartographer who first drew that southern shore? Or further still to the shore itself, ice-free, alive, the sun glinting off waves that have not touched human eyes for tens of thousands of years. The thought comes and goes like a wave, gentle, unhurried. You don't chase it. You let it pass the same way you might let the wind brush against your face without trying to hold it. You rest your hands lightly on the edge of the table, feeling the solid grain of the wood beneath your fingertips. The lamp's glow is steady now, a warm pool of light in the dimness. Every so often, the faintest creak in the old building reaches your ears, but it doesn't disturb you. If anything, it feels like part of the room's heartbeat. And then the question rises again, not sharp and demanding, but soft and lingering. How much of the past is still with us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice? You think of all the maps, stories, and artifacts that must still be out there, silent and patient. You think of all the coastlines, drawn or remembered, that could shift the way we see the world if only we looked closely enough. You realize that you may never know all the answers, and strangely that feels right. Some mysteries are meant to be carried, not solved. Some are meant to remind us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, a story that began before us and will continue long after. The map seems to agree. It offers no revelations, no sudden clarity, only its quiet presence. And in that quiet you find a kind of peace. The southern coastline is still there, as it was when you first arrived. The questions are still there too. But now they feel like companions, not puzzles. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound of imagined waves fill your mind. You can almost feel the wind off that long-lost shore cool against your skin. And in that moment, you understand that part of what makes this map so powerful is not what it tells you, but what it allows you to feel, the connection to places and times beyond your own, the reminder that there is always more to discover. When you open your eyes again, the vault is exactly as it was. The lamp, the table, the map, and you. But something inside you has shifted, just enough to carry this moment with you when you leave. You stand here, breathing slowly, letting the silence hold you for just a little longer before you move on. The silence holds you like a blanket now, thick, steady, unbroken except by the soft hum of your own breath. You can feel how your body has melted into the calm of this place, as though the vault itself were a cocoon keeping the noise of the world outside. The Piri Reis map lies in front of you, unchanging, and yet it feels as though you've travelled a great distance with it. You trace the southern coastline with your eyes one more time, slowly, almost like following a path on foot. You know that you could look at this curve 100 times and still not be done with it. The questions it carries will not go away. They will travel with you. And maybe that's the point. You think of everything you've seen in your mind tonight. Piri's table in the Ottoman court, the other strange maps from across centuries, the ancient navigators who might have traced this land from the deck of their ships, the myths whispered beside fires, the modern scientist comparing satellite scans to lines drawn in fading ink. And then there's the thread that runs through it all, human curiosity, the refusal to leave a question alone even when it refuses to answer. It strikes you that the map has been generous in its own way, not in giving you clarity, but in giving you something to carry, a reminder that the world is older and stranger than we usually admit, and that even in the age of satellites and instant data, there are still things we do not fully understand. Perhaps that's why you find yourself leaning into the mystery rather than trying to solve it completely. There is a strange comfort in not knowing, in allowing the unknown to exist beside you. It keeps the world alive, just beyond the reach of certainty. The lamp's glow trembles slightly, casting tiny ripples of shadow across the parchment. You imagine the same light falling across the map in the centuries before you, brushing over its coasts and contours as other hands unrolled it. Some of those people may have been kings or scholars. Others perhaps were simply caretakers who didn't even know what they were preserving. And now you are part of that same chain, another moment in the map's long vigil. Your gaze drifts upward on the parchment, past South America's sharp curve, over Africa's bulge, along the scattered islands of the Atlantic. Each line carries its own history, its own stories, many of which are lost to us. But the southern coast always draws your eyes back. That curve, bold and sure, feels like the signature of the unknown. You take in a slow breath and let it out even slower. The air here feels heavy but not oppressive, like the weight of a thick quilt on a cold night. Your shoulders have loosened completely now, and there is no rush, no clock in this room except the slow passage of your own thoughts. Your mind begins to step back, taking in the whole scene, the table, the lamp, the map, the cool stone walls, the faint scent of age and dust. You realize that in some strange way the vault is like the map itself. It is a container for something precious, a keeper of memory. And here you are, inside that container, holding the memory for just a little while. You wonder how many others have left this place carrying the same quiet sense you feel now. The awareness that there is always more beneath the surface, whether you're looking at a coastline under ice or at the familiar lines of your own life. Perhaps that is the final lesson the map gives, though it never speaks it loud, that the past is not dead and the unknown is not empty. They are simply hidden, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. The thought makes you smile faintly. The mystery hasn't lessened. It has only settled deeper into you, like a stone sinking gently to the bottom of a clear pool. You can see it there whenever you choose to look, but you don't need to reach for it. It will wait. You rest your palms flat on the table for a moment, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your hands. The map's edges curl faintly upward, the parchment still alive in its own way. The ink, though faded, holds its lines with quiet defiance, as though it knows its purpose is not to fade completely. You close your eyes. The waves from your imagination return steady, unhurried, washing against the shore of that southern coast. You picture yourself walking there, not as an explorer or a scholar, but simply as a visitor. You feel the sand under your feet, the cool wind off the water, the smell of salt and grass. Somewhere far inland, birds call from the slopes of a mountain range. The sound carries to you on the breeze, a voice from a world that may never have existed in your lifetime, but feels real in this moment. When you open your eyes again, the vault has not changed, but you feel lighter, as though you've just returned from a long journey. The questions are still here, the coastline is still here, and you are still standing in the same place. But inside, you have moved. You know it is time to leave this moment soon, but you linger a little longer, letting the stillness finish its work. You glance one more time at the southern coast and think of how it will still be here tomorrow, and the next day, and long after. You will walk away, but the map will stay, holding its secret until the next set of eyes meets it in the quiet. And maybe that is enough, not to know, but to have stood here, to have seen, to have wondered. You take another breath, deep, and slow, and let the silence of the vault wrap around you one last time before you step forward into whatever comes next. Before you move on entirely, there's a sense that the map wants you to understand it not only as a mystery, but also as a thing of record, something that exists in the tangible, factual world as much as in the realm of imagination. So you decide to see it through the eyes of a cataloguer, stripping away the mist for a moment and laying bare what is known. The Piri Reis map is not a rumour, it is real. It exists in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, Turkey, preserved carefully in the archives. Only a fragment survives, about a third of the original world map Piri drew in 1513. This surviving section measures roughly 90 by 65 centimetres, made on a prepared gazelle skin parchment tuff. Fine, and meant to last. The fragment shows the western coasts of Europe and Africa, the eastern coasts of South America, a portion of the Atlantic Ocean, and a mysterious southern landmass. That last part, the southern landmass, is what has sparked centuries of speculation, but in catalogue terms it is simply depicted land. The colours on the map are still visible despite the centuries. Greens and browns for land, blues for the sea, delicate touches of red in notations and compass roses. Faint latitude lines crisscross the surface, along with radiating lines from compass points, a style typical of Portolan charts, which were designed for navigators rather than scholars. Portolans emphasised coasts and harbours, often neglecting inland detail. Around the coasts are dozens of small notations, written in Ottoman Turkish in a fine, steady hand. These notes reference the sources Piri used, about 20 charts and maps in total. Among them, he lists Portuguese maps of the Indian and Atlantic Oceans, Arabic maps, and charts from the time of Alexander the Great. One note claims that a map from Christopher Columbus was among his sources, a bold statement, as no such map survives today. The southern landmass is drawn with notable confidence. Bays, inlets, and mountain ranges appear with deliberate strokes. Modern scholars have debated whether this is meant to represent Antarctica, the southern extension of South America, or simply a speculative landform imagined to fill space at the bottom of the map. Historically, the southern parts of South America had not been fully shusted by Europeans in 1513. The tip of the continent, Tierra del Fuego, would not be sailed around until Ferdinand Magellan's voyage in 1520. This means Piri was working from sources that either exaggerated or extended the known coastline far beyond what European explorers had seen at the time. In the catalogue of the museum, the Piri Reis map is classified as an early Ottoman world map fragment. It is dated precisely to the Islamic year 919, corresponding to 1513 in the Gregorian calendar. Piri signed it, adding his name and the date in one of the surviving notes. The map's rediscovery in 1929 happened during renovations at the Topkapi Palace, which had been converted into a museum by the Young Republic of Turkey. Archivists came across the rolled parchment in a storage space that had held many forgotten documents. From there, it was recognized for its historical importance, photographed and studied. Scholarly work on the map has often focused on its sources, its accuracy compared to modern coastlines, and the question of whether it contains evidence of knowledge earlier than the age of exploration. Some researchers have measured the accuracy of the African and South American coastlines and found them surprisingly close to modern projections, while others note distortions that fit with common navigational errors of the time. In 1956, Charles Hapgood brought the map to wider public attention through his correspondence with the US Air Force. A letter from Air Force cartographers, later quoted by Hapgood, noted that the depiction of the southern landmass resembled the subglacial coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. The cartographers suggested this could indicate the map's source was made before Antarctica was covered in ice, a claim that remains controversial in academic circles. The physical condition of the map today is fragile but stable. The gazelle skin parchment has darkened with age, and the edges are frayed. Small cracks and losses appear in the surface, particularly along the outer borders. It is kept in a controlled environment to protect it from light, humidity, and handling. Public display is rare. Reproductions are more often used for study and exhibition. In cataloguing terms, there is no mystery in these facts. The map is described by its dimensions, its material, its surviving features, and its known history. It is labelled, classified, preserved. And yet, even within these dry details, the story hums quietly. The measurements and pigments do not explain the southern coast. The note about Alexander's time does not tell us who first drew the lines. The physical survival of the parchment does not tell us why it was kept, or by whom during the centuries it lay unseen. You realise as you stand there that even the most precise description cannot strip the map of its atmosphere. You could record every centimetre, every pigment, every note, and still the southern landmass would wait there, silent, carrying its unanswered question. In the end, the catalogue entry is like the coastline on a Portoland chart, clear enough to navigate by, but only a line at the edge of a much wider world. The facts tell you what is here. They do not tell you why it exists or what came before. You look back at the map now, seeing it as both an object and a presence. It is a thing you could measure, weigh, photograph, and yet it is also a place where imagination and memory meet. Its gazelle skin parchment is no more than a surface, but its lines are a doorway. And maybe that's the secret the catalogue can't hold, that the Piri Reis map is more than an artifact. It is a conversation between centuries, between the known and the unknown. The official record can keep it safe, but only curiosity can keep it alive. You take in the last details, the careful calligraphy, the faint compass lines, the small ships painted in the Atlantic, their sails still catching an invisible wind. And you know that when you step away from this table, you will carry both the record and the mystery together, because one without the other would be incomplete. You've seen the map in its physical truth measured, described, catalogued. But now, as you stand before it again, the factual frame begins to fade, and the anomalies return to the forefront. This time, you focus not on the stories or the speculations, but on the actual, documented oddities, the stubborn details that refuse to fit neatly into the official explanation. The first is the southern landmass itself. On the surviving fragment, it stretches across the lower edge, its coast curving with a confidence that suggests direct observation. Bays, headlands, and a range of mountains are all drawn with deliberate strokes. If this is meant to be the continuation of South America, as some scholars propose, then the coastline is oddly inconsistent. It diverges from the real shape in ways that make less sense than if it were something entirely separate. The second anomaly is accuracy, sometimes in surprising places. When the African coastline on the map is compared to modern charts, the match is impressively close. This is unusual for a map of 1513, since calculating longitude was not possible with precision until the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century. Yet Peary's Africa, while not perfect, is far more precise than one might expect from guesswork or second-hand reports. A third oddity lies in the depiction of South America. The continent extends too far south for what was officially known in Peary's day. Some modern researchers note that the extreme southern part is drawn as if it connects to the mysterious southern landmass, creating a continuous coastline. If this was guesswork, it's peculiar that the imagined land has a level of detail mountains, inlets, that would have been unnecessary for a speculative addition. The fourth anomaly involves islands. Scattered in the Atlantic are a number of small land masses that do not correspond to known islands today. Some may be misplacements of real islands. Others may have been inspired by sailors' tales of lands glimpsed and lost. But a few appear in positions that line up with submerged features on modern ocean floor maps, banks and plateaus that could have been islands when sea levels were lower during the last ice age. Fifth, there is the matter of scale and proportion. In several regions, the relative distances between coasts are more accurate than expected for the time. For example, the placement of South America relative to Africa is closer to modern reality than to the common errors of early European maps. This raises the question, did Peary inherit a projection from an older, more accurate source, even if he did not understand the mathematics behind it? And then there's the most famous anomaly, the alleged match between the southern coastline and the subglacial bedrock of Antarctica. In the 1950s, when seismic surveys mapped Queen Maud Land beneath the ice, some cartographers noted that its shape bore similarities to Peary's depiction. The claim, repeated by Hapgood and others, is that the match is too close to be coincidence, and that the original source map must have been made before Antarctica froze over. Mainstream scholars dispute this, arguing that the resemblance is not exact and that similar shapes can occur by chance. Still, the idea persists because the comparison is difficult to dismiss entirely when viewed side by side. A smaller but intriguing anomaly appears in Peary's own notes on the map. In one margin, he states that some of his sources came from the time of Alexander and from the maps of the ancients. These references have never been fully explained. They might simply be a flourish, meant to give authority to his work. But if taken literally, they suggest that Peary had access to sources far older than the age of exploration. There is also a question of projection. Some modern analysts believe the Peary-Rice map may have been drawn using a type of projection that accounts for the curvature of the Earth in a way uncommon for its time. This would not necessarily require modern knowledge, but it would require access to source maps made with consistent measurements over long distances, something difficult to achieve without advanced navigation. Finally, there is the survival of the map itself. That may not seem like an anomaly, but given how many documents from the 16th century have been lost, the fact that this one fragment survived is striking. It raises the possibility that it was deliberately preserved, perhaps for its unusual features. One by one you turn these anomalies over in your mind. None of them, on its own, is proof of anything extraordinary. Each could be explained some more easily than others within the limits of conventional history. But taken together, they form a pattern that hints at knowledge passing through time in ways we do not fully understand. You imagine the chain again. An ancient navigator draws a precise coastline from direct observation. That map survives long enough to be copied by another, then another, travelling across cultures and languages. Along the way, some details are lost, others distorted, but the core shape endures. Centuries later, it arrives in Piri's collection of sources. He traces it onto his own parchment, perhaps without knowing that the coastline he's copying has not been seen in its true form for thousands of years. In your mind, you see that original map, not the fragment before you, but the first of its line. It lies on a table in a place now long gone, perhaps a coastal city whose harbour is buried under silt or submerged beneath the sea. The person who drew it looks out over a shore we can no longer visit, measuring angles by the stars, recording each curve with care. They cannot know that their work will travel across centuries, nor that it will one day be studied by someone standing in a stone vault half a world away. You look again at the Piri race map. The anomalies are alive in your thoughts. Each one is like a window not quite open, but not entirely closed. They offer glimpses into possibilities. A lost coastline, a submerged island, an older projection, an ancient source. And maybe that's why the map remains so compelling. It is not just a relic, it is an invitation. It asks you to notice what doesn't fit, to follow the lines where they lead, even if they disappear into the ice, the ocean, or the deep past. In the end, the anomalies do not demand that you believe in any single theory. They only ask that you keep looking, and so you do. Your eyes moving again across the southern shore, the scattered islands, the fine script in the margins, holding both the known and the unknown together in the same steady breath. The air in the vault feels different now, warmer, almost alive. You realize you've been here a long time, yet the hours have passed like a slow, steady tide. The Piri race map has drawn you through its lines, its mysteries, its history and anomalies, until it feels less like an object on a table and more like a companion in a long and wordless conversation. You take one last deep breath and let it fill you, this scent of aged parchment and faint lamp oil settling in your senses. You feel the stone floor beneath your feet, cool and solid, anchoring you in the present, even as your mind drifts to the farthest reaches of the past. This map is just a fragment, just a piece of gazelle skin, inked 5 centuries ago, and yet, in its lines and curves, it carries whispers from worlds we do not remember. Perhaps from sailors who stood on southern shores no human has seen in millennia. Perhaps from civilizations erased by time, their harbours and cities now buried under ice or sea. Or perhaps from nothing more mysterious than the hands of skilled map makers, building on each other's work across centuries until the lines became sharper than their own time could explain. The truth, whatever it may be, lies somewhere in the space between those possibilities. And maybe that's why you feel so calm now. The map doesn't need you to solve it. It only needs you to remember it. You imagine it lying here tomorrow, and the next day, and long after you've gone. Generations will come, each seeing it for the first time. Some will read the coastline as a mistake. Others will read it as a clue. All will carry away something, an image, a question, a story to tell someone else. You think of Piri himself, the man who gathered the fragments and wove them into this map. He could not have imagined the world we live in now, satellites circling above the ice, radar scanning the hidden land beneath it, the map itself reproduced in millions of glowing screens. But perhaps he knew something deeper, that a map can outlive its maker, and that its lines can carry meaning long after the ink has dried. You trace the southern coast one last time with your eyes. The shape is the same as it was when you arrived, but it no longer feels static. It feels alive, like the faintest memory of a place you've never been. You can almost hear the wind over its shores, the crash of waves against its cliffs. And in that imagined wind, you hear the echo of the question that has been with you from the beginning. What if the oldest map on Earth shows lands we don't know? You don't have the answer, but you know the question will stay with you. You'll carry it out of this vault and into the world, and maybe in some quiet moment years from now, you'll find yourself looking at a coastline on a screen, in a book, in real life, and the memory of this night will come rushing back. The lamp flickers gently. The map rests in its place. The vault is still. You let your breathing slow again, letting the calm settle into every part of you. This is where the story ends for now, not with a conclusion, but with an open horizon. The map will wait, the mystery will wait, and the sea of time will keep on moving, as it always has. You turn to leave, but before you step away, you take one last look, not to study, but simply to see, to fix the image in your mind exactly as it is now. The warm light over the parchment, the silent vault, the quiet weight of history all around you. And as you climb the steps toward the world above, you carry with you not just the image of the Piri Reis map, but the stillness of this place, the reminder that some questions are worth holding on to simply because they make the world feel larger. Now, as we close this journey together, I want to leave you with that same question resting softly in your mind. What else might lie hidden, waiting for us to remember? If this journey through the past has stirred your curiosity, I'd love for you to share it. Like this story, if it spoke to you, share it so others can walk these quiet halls with us, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from tonight. And as always, may the silence guide you through the past.